Hello students, Professor Benavides here. Let's talk about part 2 of chapter 5. As you know, chapter 5 is about the if statements, and part 1 we talked about learning about understanding conditional tests. And in part 2 we're going to talk about the if statements, the different variations thereof, simple if statements, two-way branching constructs. We're also going to talk about creating if, elif ladders, and multiple variations thereof. So let's start off with what an if statement is. When you understand conditional statements, you can start writing if statements. And there's several different kinds of if statements, and the one you choose depends upon the number of conditions that you need to test. So let's start off with a simple if statement. Now, with the simplest if statement, just tests a condition. It has one test and one action. So you could put any conditional test in the first line and just about any action in the indented block following the test. If the conditional test evaluates true, then Python executes the code following the if statement. If the test evaluates to false, Python ignores the code following the if statement. So here we're looking at a real simple example on here. We'll go ahead and run it real fast. And basically, here's the idea. On line 1, I'm setting age to 19. And then on line 2, I perform a test. I say if age is greater than or equal to 18. So I will then perform an action. Now notice that when I ran it, it ran, okay, you're old enough, but let's say you didn't indent properly and it's right there. So let me go ahead and run this and let's see the error. So we get a traceback indentation error. I'm just going to do a Control Z to take it back to where it was, and then do another Control B to make it run the right way. Now, indentation plays the same role in if statements as it did in for loops. All indented lines after the if statement will be executed if the test passes, and the entire block of indented lines will be ignored if the test does not pass. You can have many lines of code, as many lines of code as you want in the block following the if statement. For example, in this next demo here that I run, notice how on line 3 I'm indented, and guess what? On line 4 I'm indented as well. So in this particular condition, we're saying if age is greater than or equal to 18. In that particular case, two things happen. Now notice again, let me go ahead and reiterate the importance of indentation, on here. This indentation, this block of code will be done if this condition is true. If I don't have proper indentation, then if this condition is true, this stuff will not get printed, So let's go on to the next example on here. Let's look at the two-way branching construct on here. Here in this particular case, we've got the else clause. So I'm setting age to 17, and then I perform a test. Indentation VIP, as I said. The else clause defines an action to take if the conditional test fails. Okay, so let's take a quick look at this. Let me run it. So sorry, you're too young to vote. Please register to vote as soon as you turn 18 on here. So I wish Sublime Text had a built-in debugger like the more advanced IDEs, but then again, this is more like a text editor. It's not like NetBeans, which has an excellent debugger, or Visual Studio, or even Visual Studio Code, which have debuggers that allow you to see the logic of the program and find problems in your code. But for right now, we'll just have to visually go through the idea on here. And on line 2, is this true or false here? Is age greater than or equal to 18? No, it's not. So these two lines do not print. We go to the else clause. All right. So this is we often We want to take one action when a condition test passes and a different action on all other cases. Python's if-else syntax makes this possible. And an if-else block is similar to a simple if statement, but the else statement, or I like to call it a clause, allows you to define an action or a set of actions that are executed when the condition test fails. So this condition test, this is the condition test right here. When that fails, the else clause fires, okay? So now that brings us to the if, elif, else chain, okay? And I'm gonna go ahead and run that real fast so we can see that. And on line 1, I set age to 12, and then I have an if clause followed by an elif. You know, I want to say elsif because, you know, coming from, you know, Java, that's what we called it then. So often you'll need to test more than 2 possible situations. If that's the case, then the if-else structure doesn't work. We'll need to add an elif. So this is a good example of that. This is actually the mark of the beginner on here, because look at this. We're specifying values inside of a string when really, I'm giving the story away, they should probably be in a variable. But it does work out, and it is syntactically correct. So, but let's just pay attention to what the logic, to the logic here. Python executes only one block in an if, elif, else chain. It runs each conditional test in order until one passes. When the test passes, the code following the test is executed, and Python skips the rest of the tests. Okay, so in this particular case, let's see, if I set age to 12, the first conditional test is not satisfied. The second one, yes, is satisfied. So it's going to go ahead and say your admission is 25, and then this line 8 and line 9 will be skipped. Okay, let's look at another version of this, which is a little bit more professional in style. And I do have a hard time trying to convince my students that it's superior to the other one. It's more concise, it's more efficient, and it's the way more advanced programmers, code on here. So let me go ahead and run it, and guess what? You get the same answer. Yeah. So why am I paying so much attention to this? So basically, what happens here is on line 5, I go ahead and use a variable. So I said 0 to price on line 5, 25 to price on line 6, or 40 on line 9. Why is this more efficient? Because it's easier to maintain over time. I've got one string on line 12, a formatted string, and I'm using a placeholder, and I access the variable there. Okay? So, and I don't have that same string repeated inside of each condition. See how on this one here, I repeat the string? Okay, so this is hopefully something that you'll be graduating from, using this kind of style to this kind of style. It's more efficient. It's easier to maintain. Okay, it's a sign of programming, experience to do it the second way rather than the first way. Okay, let's go on to the next example here. We can use, we only had one elif, but what if we have a whole ladder of things that we want to test for? So we can have as many elif blocks as we need to. In this particular case, let me go ahead and run it. Let's say we had more conditions to check. So if age is set to 12, then in that particular case, line 5, the condition on line 5 will execute. Once this line is executed, then the rest of the conditions is skipped, and it comes to line 12. Okay. If you were the way to play around with these things is obviously if you go ahead and you know, you can change the age and play around with it to test every condition out. That'd be a good way of learning on here. Like for example, if I wanted to go ahead and say if the age is 100, how much would you charge them? Control B, they're going to get charged 20 bucks. They get like a little, I guess you call it senior discount, right? So I'm going to just do the Control Z, get it back to 12. And let's look at the next one on here. Now, if you want more precision in the way your code is written and executed, you would probably skip the else and use an else if. So the idea is this. Let's go through the idea here. Python doesn't require an else block at the end of an elif chain. Sometimes an else block is useful though. Sometimes it is, but however, sometimes it's more clear to use an additional elif statement that catches the specific condition of interest. So going back, I'm comparing both of them. The else block is a catch-all statement, and he doesn't show you how to use it here, but it matches any condition that wasn't a match by a specific if or elif test, and that can sometimes include invalid or even malicious data. The way I always use the trailing else on here is if something's out of range. Let's say that you have ages going from 0 to 100. If someone enters in -50 or 300, but you never know, maybe they're vampire, right? So if they enter in, 300, it's going to respond with something like, please enter a valid age. So it's used to catch invalid data. I guess better than age, you'd be like, let's say you know that everybody in this particular company makes between, $15 and $25 an hour. So if they're trying to enter in something like $50 an hour, that would be out of range and would require some kind of feedback to let the user know that it is out of range. So the else has its place and the elif has its place. You just have to know that the else is not required, but the elif, if you're working through a structure here, sometimes it's more appropriate to use an elif, because this way you know that really everybody who's over or equal to age 65 gets a price of 20. In the other one, and this other one over here, it's kind of, you get the same answer, but it's not as clear visually in the code how that would work out. Like for example, well, you get the idea, right? On this, between this else thing on here. Remember, I did say you could play around with this. Let's try the -1 thing here. So in this case, it's 0. I would have, if you were doing a range, I think it would have been better if age would have been, 1 to 4, and then the else would catch, and it would be something you could say that it's an inappropriate age kind of thing. Okay, so let's go on to our next example on here. So let's go on to this one here. This uses a list on line 1. And in this particular case, this technique makes sense when more than one condition can be true. So if more than one condition can be true, what you're going to want to use is a series of independent tests, a series of independent if statements. So I have an if statement on line 5, another one on 7, another one on 9. Let me go ahead and run that. So it's saying adding mushrooms, adding extra cheese, finished making your pizza. So my list here, I've only got the list of extra toppings or requested toppings. There's 2 of them. I go through a whole bunch, I go through 3 independent if statements, and I have a print statement that is appropriate for that particular test. Now this is I really like this. It's fairly unique to to Python. We're saying if mushrooms in requested toppings. So that in keyword allows us to look inside the list, and it's going to return a true or a false condition, a Boolean condition, right? So if the condition is true, then you have that print statement. So the first one fired, second one didn't fire, right? Because there's no pepperoni in that list, but extra cheese did fire on there. So this technique makes sense when more than one condition could be true. Now, let me show you how you have to be very delicate about how you use your conditions, because in this next example, we're going to use an elif. And if I use an elif, the program doesn't work out right. Because remember, when you're using an elif, only one of those conditions can be true. And when it is true, the rest of them are skipped and it goes to the end of the structure. So in this case, adding mushrooms was true, but guess what? The elif for pepperoni and the elif for extra cheese was not checked or not tested, and therefore we went to finish making your pizza. So this code example here does not work properly. You've got to design these, in the right kind of way. So, in summary, for this idea here, if you want only one block of code to run, use an if, elif, else chain. If more than one block of code needs to be run, use a series of independent if statements. Okay. Now let's go ahead and go over the try it yourself. And out of pure boredom, I'm going to go ahead and use Visual Studio Code to go over those other ones here, just to do something different. So on this one here, it says here, imagine an alien was just shot down in a game, create a variable called alien color and assign it a value of green, yellow, or red. Write an if statement to test whether the alien color is green. If it is, print a message that the player has just earned 5 points. Write one version of this program that passes the if test and another version that fails. This version, the version that fails, has no output. So let's just go ahead and take a look at this. Let me go ahead and run this on here. So when I run this, it goes and says you just earned 5 points. So I assign green to alien color, and then on line 4, I perform a test. And here's the condition. We're testing to see if green, is equal, right? Is it equal to green? And the answer, and that evaluates to true, in which case we say you just earned 5 points. Let's look at the next one on here, which is the else on here, or let's do the failing part of it, right? Let's make it, assign it to red and run it. And of course, when you run it, nothing comes out. Down here below, see, before it said you earn 5 points, now nothing happens because I assign red to alien color, and then I test to see if green, is green equal to red? No. So you just earned 5 points does not fire. Okay. So there's the 2 tests that we were supposed to do. Let's go to 5.4. In this particular case, let's just go, we know enough to go through the logic on here. This is a two-way branching construct. It utilizes the else clause. Now, I'm going to show you how to use the Visual Studio Code debugger in a very simple way. Okay, the debugger has, I'm going to only use this so that we can see the flow of control. Now, the flow of control can be useful when we're studying loops as well as selection constructs like this if statement. So right down here below, I'm going to write another line of code. And I'm just going to go ahead and say print, I'm finished. Okay. And that's just to know when we get to the very end. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set what's called a breakpoint. That means it's going to stop right there. Then I'm going to go ahead and come over here to the run button with the little bug on it, and I'm going to click it. Then I'm going to click on Run Debug and Python file, and it goes and stops right there. I can use the step into, or I can press F11. I'm going to press F11 here. So notice right now, this is the line of code that's going to get executed, but has not executed yet. So my only intention here is not to go and use this as a debugger to help me find out if I have a logical problem with my code. I only want to follow the flow of control here so that we can visually see, the conditions. So I'm going to press F11 and we go to the next line of code. And remember, the line of code that's highlighted is the line of code that's going to get executed, but it has not executed yet. So is alien color green? So if you point to it, you'll see, yeah, it's got green in there. So this should fire, right? Yes, it does. So you just earned 5 points, got printed. And then look at this. It's coming to this last line of code. Line 7 and 8 got skipped. So now I'm going to press F11 again one more time, and it prints, I am finished. And I only added this line of code to show that we have exited the structure on here, right? So the indentation is really important. If I had not indented it, it would have been part of the else clause. Let's go to the else on here. I think we did that one. It's green. This is yellow. Oh, this will show the else part of it. Okay. So let me go ahead and put that on here again. And I'm going to go ahead and run the debugger again after I set in a little breakpoint. Select the Python file, and I'm going to press F11. So do you think this one is going to run? Alien color is yellow. Is that equal to green? No. So line 5 or line 6 did not get printed because this condition was not true. So it's going to say you just earned 10 points, and then it's going to say I am finished. Okay. So hopefully this little color arrangement on here, this could probably be a big selling point why you want to get to Visual Studio as soon as possible. Later on, I'll show you how you can use this to find out, logical problems, with your code. Okay. Here in this particular one here, let me just put in another statement at the end here so we can know when it ends. So I set color to red, and then I'm using an elif else. So let's go ahead and visually see this. Did I put the, I forgot the breakpoint, so they didn't know it didn't stop. So let me put the breakpoint in, and it just putting it in there so I can just walk through it. I just want to walk through this thing. So I'm going to press F11. See, it stops on the first one. It performs the first test. If I point to this, it'll show me what it is. But the other thing you could do, guys, I didn't show you. Over here, we have the local variables, and it shows me what's inside of every variable. But right now, these are strings, but if they were numbers, I could see what's inside of every. Now, this can be very helpful when you're doing debugging to make sure everything is going into the right places. So right now, do you think that'll be a true statement? I don't think so. Let's press F11. It does. So we're going to test the next one. Remember, the line of code that's highlighted is the line of code that's going to get executed but has not executed yet. That didn't work either. So guess what? The else clause, the catch-all. Remember we said the catch-all. In this case, it's going to say you just earned 15 points. And it goes to unfinished. Excuse me. So we'll take that off. And let's go to the next one on here. And in this one here, the stages of life. I'm going to go to the very end here, press enter, and put the same little closer on here. This is an example of a whole bunch of elifs on here. Let me set my breakpoint and run the debugger. And I'm going to press F11. Now age is set to 17. The first one's not going to catch. Second one's not going to catch. This one's not going to catch either. But look at this one here. Boom, it goes into line 10. You see that? It didn't do that with the other ones. If you have a whole bunch of elifs, you use elifs when you need to have only one condition fire or be true. So now it pops down to the bottom. I'm finished. Okay. And so that's this little button right here. It can be, hopefully you find it, helpful, and a useful idea. Let's go on to the next example on here. I'm just going to do the same old little thing on here. Now this is the example of a whole bunch of independent if statements on here. So let me go ahead and set my debugging thingy, and then I'm going to go ahead and run it. And select the Python file, press F11. Remember, you could be clicking up here in this little bar, and you could do the step into. So that didn't fire because it's not apples. We've got blueberries. I don't even know what salmon berries is. Is that like a real thing? Just can't be, right? I know about peaches and blueberries, but salmon berries, it's got to be just a misspelling or something. What do you guys think? But anyway, let's test for apples. Is apples in there? Nope. Blueberries? Look at this. It pops line 8 is going to be printed. Remember, the line that's highlighted, it's the line that's going to execute, but it's not executed yet. So it says you really like blueberries. We're going to continue along the way. I'm going to press F11 because it's easier on here. And it's going to test for peaches, and you really like peaches. And then finally it comes down over here and it says, I am finished. Okay. Well, that's the end of this section on all the different kinds of if statements. We learned about the simple if, the two-way branching construct. We learned about when we should use a whole bunch of elifs versus one that has the else clause. We learned that the else clause is not required, and it's really up to us to build the selection construct appropriately for the problem statement that we're dealing with. Other than that, I want to tell you thank you and goodbye. Professor Benavides, over and out.